Hi Mzansi, have you seen justice? This is the headline of an article written by the Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu on IOL on the 7th of January this year. In the article, the minister questions what the Constitution has done for the victims of colonialism. Many have labeled the article an attack on the Constitution and the judiciary. I want to bring into the conversation, I want to bring to your attention two quotes that we've extracted from the article, which take aim at the judicial system in South Africa. So let's bring those up before we continue our conversation on it. So here's the first quote. It says, "The most dangerous African today is the mentally colonized African. And when you put them in leadership positions or as interpreters of the law, they are worse than your oppressor. In America, these interpreters are called the house Negroes," it reads at one point. Let's bring up the second one, the second quotation from that article by NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu. "Today, in the high echelons of our judicial system, are these mentally colonized Africans who have settled with the worldview and mindset of those who have dispossessed their ancestors." She goes on to say in that quotation that they are only too happy to lick the spittle of those who falsely claim superiority. The lack of confidence that permeates their rulings against their own speaks very loudly. And so on and on. You really are spoiled for choice in terms of talking points from that article. Well, it's gotten people talking. Let's bring into the conversation ANC activist, member of the ANC, Chrispin Phiri. He has penned a response to Sisulu in which he does not hold back his criticism of the NEC member. He joins me now for that conversation. I've got to emphasize that Chrispin Phiri joins me purely in his personal capacity. He is an activist in the ANC, so he writes that article that he wrote on News 24, but also does this interview in his personal capacity. Chris, thank you for joining me. So, what doesn't sit well with you about what the member of the National Executive Committee, Lindiwe Sisulu, has written about our Constitution, rule of law, and judicial leadership?
Thank you for having me on your show, Tulas. And indeed, I think from the quotes that you have extracted, we actually hit the nail on the head as to what exactly is the problem with the article that is penned by a well-respected comrade in Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu. Some have even pointed, I think veteran Mavuso Msimang has even pointed out that at some stage she was also in Konto Wesizwe. So this is not someone who is a Johnny-come-lately to South African politics, someone who's well-respected and who has been there for some time. And I think the concerning aspect of that article, particularly right from the onset, is to label members of the judiciary as mentally colonized individuals. Not only is that condescending, but it's a direct attack on the caliber of individuals that we have in our judiciary. But moreover, the article actually creates this impression that the Constitution fell out of the sky, and as though the ANC has no say in how and what was in the Constitution. The Constitution is a derivative of the Freedom Charter. It's based primarily on the Freedom Charter. And for a member of that caliber to come and say to us that it's a neoliberal construct or a neoliberal document and people who interpret it are quote-unquote house Negroes is extremely regrettable. But also concerning is that here we're dealing with a member of the executive who has had the pleasure of being in no less than, I think, 8 actually, ministries. And when you take such a responsibility, you swear an oath to the very Constitution that she now maligns. And one must then ask, what provision in the Constitution prevented her from implementing pro-Black policies? What provision in the Constitution? And that's really the burden of proof. And the article doesn't even come close to meeting this burden of proof. But that is the question that is blatantly lacking in the article as to what provision exactly prevents the ANC or members of the ANC from implementing policies which are pro-poor in particular, which is what the ANC seeks to achieve, is to uplift the conditions of the pro-poor people in South Africa, particularly those who are black. Thirdly, Tulas, the article really goes as far as creating an impression that if we have bad policies, that in and of itself negates the Constitution. And that's not true. The rule of law is not negated by bad policy. In fact, it's political principles and the executive that make policies, which are meant to implement the very same Constitution. But perhaps the last most problematic part for me in the article is the fact that throughout the article, we don't get a sense that this is a member of the African National Congress who is willing to defend the rule of law and is willing to defend ANC policies. As I have said, this Constitution is a derivative of the Freedom Charter, a fundamental pillar of our ANC policies. And for one to attack it in this manner is equivalent of attacking the Freedom Charter itself.
Sure. What do you believe is really at play here, Chris? Why now? Why this kind of critique? Look, I'm not in the ANC, obviously. I'm not a member of the ANC. I can't claim to know what she has argued in various structures and meetings of the ANC, what she's advocated. But at least publicly, I can't find a record of this kind of rhetoric as being part of her body of intellectual output over the years. Leads some to ask the question, what's really going on?
Well, we have seen in recent times populist rhetoric for some amongst us in the African National Congress, which would suggest that the Constitution is problematic or the judiciary is a problematic institution. And one can only describe that as a wave of expediency and populism at best, because these institutions are in place to prevent the very same comrades who are in positions of authority from wielding their authority in a willy-nilly manner. The Constitution is a set of a moral framework which enables us to hold anyone in the society accountable. Even capital itself can be held accountable in terms of the Constitution. For instance, there's a section in our Constitution that speaks to ensuring that our economy is competitive. And if you do look at our economic structure currently, you would find that there are a number of oligopolies in our economic structure. And one then begs the question, how do we use the Constitution to ensure that we break up the economy that is not competitive and that is highly centralized to a certain few number of individuals? So the Constitution binds all of us. It doesn't just bind the political elite. It is a tool for each and every citizen. I also want to say this to us. I might have missed this earlier. The article also characterizes the Constitution as anti-African. Now, there are a number of judgments which have been produced and brought down from the Constitutional Court, which actually require our laws to be infused with Ubuntu. Now, for one to include that, or for one to conclude that, that is anti-African, really beggars belief. So these are the problems with that article. And like I say, Comrade Lindy is highly respected. We do expect and we do appreciate it when NEC members give an exposition on their views. But when they do so, we should hold them to a very high bar. And that bar should be one where we see factual positions being put across, but coherent arguments as well. The less said about the coherency of the article on the whole, I think, the better, unfortunately.
Sure. Chris, I know that in your response, you don't direct yourself to this question of the bigger picture of 2022 being a conference year. And, you know, at a later stage, there will be contestation for various positions of leadership. But other commentators have done exactly that, with the suggestion being made that, you know, she's basically singing off the RET hymn book and basically trying to capitalize on a constituency that already exists, that seeks to, you know, say that South Africans have reason to be aggrieved about the Constitution, not necessarily about the performance of the people who should have executed the aspirations that are embodied in the Constitution. Do you share that critique that says she's simply looking for a constituency ahead of the, a possible run at the presidency of the ANC, or have you not formed that view?
I wouldn't want to ascribe what the motives are for the article. Maybe in that regard, maybe she can speak for herself as to what the thinking was. And we've noted, or at least I have noted, that there are a series of these articles that have come out and from her pen in particular. What they seek to achieve, I wouldn't know. But also to say this to us is that fundamentally no one is opposed to radical economic transformation. We do want our economy to be transformed, and we do want everyone to participate in that economy. So to ascribe radical economic transformation only to a select few within the African National Congress, and I think this has been a consistent refrain, is a bit mischievous. I don't think you'll find any member of the African National Congress who says we shouldn't have a transformed economy. I really wouldn't find anyone in the NEC who would say that. But also more importantly, like I've just illustrated, the Constitution itself does require that the economy be transformed. So you cannot argue that this Constitution is an impediment to the transformation of our economy and society on the whole.
As you say that, Chris, I also remember that I think it was sometime last year when the ANC, after one of its National Executive Committee meetings, came out with a statement that sort of re-emphasized that the constitution we have is actually a constitution that the ANC campaigned for, was that the ANC championed to a large extent. As we draw to a close of our conversation, Chris, do you believe that there are grounds for her to be called to account in terms of, I don't know, either the ANC's constitution or perhaps at state level, if you are able to address yourself to that, or, one way or another, for her to explain her views and be called to account?
Well, I think she was expressing her views, and I can say, I think the ANC would come to say this is not the position of the ANC. And those who are charged with positions of authority maybe can evaluate whether the ANC has been brought into disrepute, but I doubt that we would want to go that far. We would want to encourage people to debate. And if there's one thing that we can give the article is that generally why we are here now is that it has generated a great debate in society. But of course, the manner in which and what is being debated may be questionable, but I think we won't penalize people for raising a debate. But I speak for myself in that regard.
Lastly, Chris, and this is separate in a way, slightly removed from at least what she, the way that she states her views in her article. What will you say to those South Africans who hold genuinely the belief that the Constitution is a stumbling block to transformation, those that bought into the rhetoric that was held in the highest levels of the ANC in the last few years, that actually part of the reason why we've not made progress on issues such as land reform and restitution, for example, is quote-unquote, and I'm holding things in my hands, I can't do those inverted commas dramatically enough, willing buyer, willing seller situation that we've been told about over the last few years. What will you say to those that say it is a compromise document, it appeases the capitalist class and doesn't really advance transformation, or at the very least is not being applied and interpreted in a way that, that advances transformation?
Well, I would say history has got no blank pages, right? So we actually know how the Constitution came about. It didn't fall like from pie in the sky. It didn't come from the back of someone's pocket. There's an entire story told by the likes of former NEC members and Minister Bridget Mabandla, former Judge L.B. Sachs, as to how each and every provision that we have in the Constitution came about. On the instructions of the great Oliver Tambo. So really to argue that this is a compromise document is not only lazy, but it's ahistorical. But moreover, those people they're never able to cite one provision in the Constitution that is anti-transformation, or cite a provision in the Constitution that actually prevents one from expropriating land without compensation. And one of the things that some of us have always advocated is that under this very Constitution, land expropriation without compensation is a possibility, and it can be implemented. So for us to then scapegoat the actual Constitution instead of implementing what it requires of us is cowardice, and not only cowardice, but blatantly opportunistic and populist to the tunes of the time. So I would urge those who say that the Constitution is a sellout document, let us actually then say which provisions are problematic, but also what we have seen over the years, maybe 2-3 years to be precise, is this legalization of political issues. We can't blame legal issues for a lack of political will. I think the Constitution is very clear in what it seeks, the type of South Africa that we want. For instance, the preamble blatantly says we recognize the injustices of the past. Now, how do you recognize the injustices of the past and then create a hurdle to correct those injustices of the past? That would mean that the document itself is incoherent. There are a number of provisions in the Constitution that have really, over the years, had it not been for the judiciary, our very own comrades would have been at the helm of anti-poor policies, or policies that actually marginalize Africans in particular. So I think this Constitution is an important document, and it is something that all ANC members should be able to defend, because, like you had said, it is the ANC that fought for this Constitution. It is the ANC that actually orchestrated and built this Constitution from the get-go.
Chrispin Phiri, I've got to thank you for sharing your views candidly in your capacity as an ANC member. That's Chrispin Phiri there, an ANC member, responding to the article that's got tongues wagging that has been penned by NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu. For the record, I've got to point out that we reached out to Lindiwe Sisulu because we wanted to engage with her thinking on these issues, and the response we got from Steve Motale, who is the ministry spokesperson for Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, says Minister Sisulu is satisfied her opinion piece has contributed to the public discourse. Minister Sisulu also appreciates the huge interest in the views she expressed. She, however, feels she has made her point in writing and is not going to do any further interviews. So that's that then. She's satisfied that she has stated her position and it has generated debate and is not doing any further interviews.